I stood in the doorway of what used to be our bedroom, my duffel bag still slung over my shoulder, dirt from deployment still under my nails. 5 years. 5 years of sleeping in sand, of dodging bullets, of writing letters to a woman who signed hers with "Forever Yours." And there she was, my wife, sitting on the edge of our bed, her hand resting on a swollen belly I didn't give her. But it wasn't just her. It was him. My father stood by the window, shirtless, his back to me. The same back I used to look up to as a kid. The same man who shook my hand the day I left and said, "I'll take care of her, son. Don't you worry." I didn't speak. I didn't move. The rain outside hammered against the glass like it was trying to drown out the sound of my heart splitting in half. She looked at me, not with guilt, not with shame, but with pity. Like I was the one who didn't belong anymore. "You weren't supposed to come home yet," she whispered. And that's when I realized I had been erased. Replaced. While I was bleeding for a country that felt like home, they turned my home into a gravesite. I dropped my bag. I didn't slam the door. I just left it open. Like a tomb. I was 22 when I enlisted, and she was 20, standing on our porch in a sundress the color of honey, her arms wrapped around my waist like she could anchor me to the ground if she just held on tight enough. The evening sun cast long shadows across the lawn, turning everything golden and soft, and I remember thinking that if heaven had a color, it would look exactly like this. Like her. "Don't go," she whispered into my chest, her voice breaking in a way that made my ribs ache. "Please. We can figure something else out. You don't have to do this." But I did. That's what I told myself. That's what I'd been told my whole life. My father had served. His father before him. My grandfather came home with medals and stories that made him a legend in our small town. My dad came home with scars he never talked about and a look in his eyes that said he'd seen things no one should ever see. And now it was my turn. Legacy. Duty. Honor. All those words that sounded so noble when you said them out loud, but felt like chains when you tried to walk away. "I have to," I said, pulling back just enough to look at her. Her eyes were red, wet, beautiful in the way that only heartbreak can make someone beautiful. "It's what we do. It's who I am." She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No. It's who they want you to be. But what about who I need you to be? What about us?" I didn't have an answer for that. So I kissed her instead. Slow. Deep. Like I was trying to memorize the taste of her, vanilla chapstick and the faint hint of the iced tea she'd been drinking all afternoon. When I finally pulled away, she grabbed my face with both hands and looked at me like she was trying to burn my features into her memory. "I'll wait," she said, her voice trembling but certain. "I promise. No matter how long. I'll be right here." I believed her. God, I believed her so much it hurt. My father pulled up in his truck a few minutes later, the engine rumbling low and steady like a heartbeat. He didn't honk. Didn't rush me. Just sat there with his hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead, waiting. I grabbed my duffel bag from the porch, the weight of it feeling heavier than it should have. She followed me down the steps, her hand clutching mine so tightly I thought she might break my fingers. At the truck, I turned to her one last time. She was crying again, but she was smiling too, trying so hard to be brave for me. I kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. And then I let go. "I love you," I said. "I love you more," she whispered back. I climbed into the truck. My father didn't say anything as we pulled out of the driveway, but I looked back. She was still standing there, framed by the porch light, one hand raised in a wave that looked more like a surrender. I waved back. And I kept waving until we turned the corner and she disappeared from view. The drive to the base was quiet. My father wasn't a man of many words, never had been. But as we neared the gate, he reached over and gripped my shoulder, firm, steady, the way he used to when I was a kid and needed reassurance. "Make us proud, son," he said, his voice rough with something I couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. Or regret. "I will," I promised. He dropped me off at the gate, and I stood there for a moment, watching his taillights disappear into the night. I thought about her. About the way she looked in that sundress. About the way she said she'd wait. I thought I'd carry that image with me through every battle, every sleepless night, every moment I needed something to fight for. And I did. I just didn't know it would become a ghost. The first year, her letters came like clockwork. Every week, without fail, There would be an envelope waiting for me with my name scrawled across the front in her looping handwriting. I lived for those letters. I'd read them in my bunk, under the dim glow of a flashlight, imagining her voice saying the words out loud. She told me about everything. About her new job at the art studio downtown, where she was teaching kids how to paint and getting paid almost nothing but loving every second of it. About the stray cat that started showing up on our porch, and how she'd named it Sergeant because it reminded her of me, stubborn and a little scruffy. About the way the seasons changed, how the leaves turned gold and then fell, how the first snow came early that year and covered everything in silence. And she told me she missed me. Over and over again, in 100 different ways. I miss the way you hum in the shower. I miss the way you leave your socks on the floor. I miss the way you hold me when I can't sleep. I miss you. I miss you. I miss you. I wrote back just as often. I told her about the sand, the heat, the way the sun felt like it was trying to burn you alive. I told her about the guys in my platoon, Miller, who could make anyone laugh even in the worst moments, Diaz, who carried a picture of his daughter everywhere and kissed it before every mission, Jackson, who never talked about home because he didn't have one to go back to. I told her I was safe, even when I wasn't. I told her I loved her, even when the words felt too small for what I actually felt. She always signed her letters the same way, forever yours. I believed that too. But buried in those letters, in between the stories about the cat and the art studio, there were other details. Small things. Things I didn't think much of at the time. Your dad stopped by today. Fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen. He's so handy, just like you. Your dad brought groceries this week. I didn't even ask. He just showed up with bags full of food and said he didn't want me going hungry. Your dad stayed for dinner tonight. We talked about you. He misses you too. I was grateful. Relieved, even. I was 8,000 miles away, and knowing that someone was looking after her, that he was looking after her, made the distance feel a little less unbearable. I thought he was being the man I couldn't be. I thought he was protecting her. I didn't know he was replacing me. At night, when the base was quiet and the only sound was the distant hum of generators and the occasional shout from a guard tower, I'd close my eyes and imagine her. I'd picture her curling up on our couch with a book, or standing in front of a canvas with paint smudged on her hands, or lying in our bed with the window cracked open just enough to let the breeze in. I didn't know that bed wasn't ours anymore. I didn't know that the life I was imagining was already a lie. By year 2, something shifted. I couldn't pinpoint it at first. It was subtle, like the way the temperature drops just before a storm rolls in. You don't see it coming, but you feel it. The letters started arriving less frequently. Once a week became once every 2 weeks. Then once a month. And when they did come, they were shorter. Thinner. Like she was rationing her words. Life's been heavy, she wrote once. That was it. No explanation. No details. Just those 3 words, and I was supposed to understand. But I didn't understand. I didn't understand why the woman who used to fill pages with stories about her day could barely manage a paragraph. I didn't understand why her handwriting, which used to be careful and deliberate, now looked rushed, like she was writing the letters out of obligation instead of love. I told myself it was normal. That relationships survive distance. That people get busy. That life moves on even when you're not there to see it. I told myself a lot of things, because the alternative, that she was slipping away from me, was too painful to consider. The phone calls were worse. We didn't have many opportunities to talk, and when we did, it was always the same. Static-filled, 5-minute windows where I could barely hear her over the hum of the satellite connection. She'd answer on the 3rd or 4th ring, her voice distant and distracted. "Hey," she'd say, like I was an old acquaintance instead of her husband. "Hey," I'd say back, trying to sound casual even though my heart was pounding. "How are you?" "I'm fine," she'd reply. Always fine. Never good. Never great. Just fine. Just tired. "Yeah, me too." Silence. The kind that used to be comfortable but now felt suffocating. "I miss you," I'd say, because I didn't know what else to say. "I miss you too." But it didn't sound like she meant it. It sounded automatic. Rehearsed. And then, inevitably, she'd cut the call short. "I have to go," she'd say. "I'll call you back." She never did. I started calling less after that. It hurt too much to hear the distance in her voice, to feel the gap widening between us with every awkward pause and half-hearted "I love you." I stopped because it was easier to imagine her still loving me than to hear proof that she might not. But even as the letters slowed and the calls stopped, my father's presence in her life seemed to grow. He was everywhere in her stories now, no longer just a helpful neighbor, but a constant fixture. "Your dad helped me replace the porch light. It's so much brighter now. Your dad took me to the hardware store. I didn't know what kind of paint to get for the living room, and he helped me pick. Your dad stayed late last night. We watched a movie. It was nice to have company." I read those lines over and over, trying to find something wrong with them. But I couldn't. They sounded innocent. Thoughtful, even. And I was grateful. I told myself I was grateful. Because what kind of son wouldn't be thankful that his father was stepping up, filling the gaps I'd left behind? I wrote back and thanked him. "Tell Dad I said thanks for everything. I don't know what I'd do without him looking after you." She never responded to that one. One night, everything changed. We were on patrol, routine sweep through a village that intelligence said was clear. It wasn't. The IED went off 20 feet to my left, and the world turned into fire and noise and chaos. I don't remember much after that. Just the ringing in my ears, the taste of copper in my mouth, and the feeling of someone dragging me by my vest. I woke up in a medical tent, my leg wrapped in bandages, my head pounding like someone had taken a sledgehammer to it. A medic leaned over me, checking my vitals, and I grabbed his wrist. "How bad?" I croaked. "You'll live," he said. "Shrapnel in your leg. Concussion. You're lucky." Lucky? I didn't feel lucky. I felt like I'd been torn apart and stitched back together wrong. The first thing I thought about wasn't the pain. It wasn't the guys in my platoon or the mission or the fact that I'd almost died. It was her. I thought about her standing on that porch in her honey-colored dress, telling me she'd wait. I thought about the way she used to trace patterns on my chest when we lay in bed together, her fingers light and absent-minded. I thought about the life we were supposed to have, the one I was supposed to come home to. And I realized, lying there in that tent with my leg throbbing and my ears still ringing, that I couldn't lose her. I couldn't let the distance win. I couldn't let whatever was pulling us apart take her from me. So I wrote a letter. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen, and my handwriting looked like a child's, but I didn't care. I poured everything into that letter, every fear, every hope, every desperate plea for her to hold on just a little longer. "I almost died tonight," I wrote. "And the only thing I could think about was you. I don't care how hard this is. I don't care how long it takes. I'm coming home to you. I swear. Just wait for me. Please. Just wait." I sealed it, handed it to the mail clerk, and waited. Days turned into weeks. I checked every mail call, my heart jumping every time they called my name. But her name never came. No letter. No response. Nothing. She never wrote back to that one. And somewhere deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I started to wonder if she'd already let go. Year 3 was the year I learned what silence really sounded like. Not the absence of noise, there was plenty of noise in the desert. Helicopters overhead, gunfire in the distance, the low hum of generators running through the night. No, this was a different kind of silence. The kind that lived inside you. The kind that echoed in the spaces where someone used to be. Her letters, when they came at all, were unrecognizable. They'd gone from love letters to postcards. Short. Polite. Stripped of anything that resembled intimacy. "Hope you're doing well. Things here are fine. Talk soon." No more stories. No more "I miss you." Not even love at the end, just her name, signed at the bottom like she was closing a business email. Like I was a client. A stranger. I read those letters in my bunk at night, holding them up to the dim light, searching for something, anything, that felt like the woman I'd married. But she wasn't there anymore. Just her handwriting. Just her name. I stopped writing back as much. What was the point? I'd send her pages, and she'd respond with a paragraph. I'd tell her I loved her, and she'd say take care. It was like shouting into a void and hearing nothing but my own voice bouncing back. The phone calls were worse. I dreaded them now. Every time I managed to get a satellite connection and dial her number, my stomach would twist into knots. She'd answer, eventually, and her voice would be flat. Detached. "Hey. Hey." Silence. "How are you?" I'd ask, even though I already knew the answer. "I'm fine. Busy." Yeah. Me too. More silence. The kind that made my chest hurt. I should go, she'd say, barely 2 minutes in. I have things to do. Okay. I'd pause, waiting for her to say something, anything, that sounded like she still cared. I love you. Yeah. You too. And then the line would go dead. You too. Not I love you too. Just you too. Like it was a reflex. A courtesy. I started calling less. Then not at all. Because the silence after those calls was louder than anything I'd ever heard on the battlefield. My platoon noticed. They didn't say anything at first. Guys like us don't talk about feelings, don't ask questions that might crack someone open. But I could see it in the way they looked at me. Miller stopped cracking jokes when I was around. Diaz started sitting next to me during meals, not saying much, just there. Even Jackson, who barely spoke to anyone, asked me once if I was good. You good, man? I nodded. Yeah. I'm good. I wasn't good. I was unraveling. Every mission felt heavier. Every night felt longer. The only thing that had been keeping me alive, keeping me sane, was the idea of her. Of home. Of something worth surviving for. And now that was crumbling. So I threw myself into the work. Into the noise. Into anything that made me forget. I volunteered for extra patrols. Took the dangerous assignments. Stayed up late cleaning my rifle, checking my gear, doing anything to keep my mind from going to the place it always went when I was alone. Why doesn't she love me anymore? I couldn't say it out loud. Couldn't admit that the woman I'd built my entire life around was slipping through my fingers. Because if I said it, it would be real. And I wasn't ready for it to be real. Then my father called. Just once. Just one time in 3 years. I was in my bunk when the call came through, and when I heard his voice on the other end of the line, I actually felt relief. Someone from home. Someone who cared. Hey, son. Dad. My voice cracked a little. It's good to hear from you. Yeah. You too. There was a pause, and I could hear him shifting on the other end. Just wanted to check in. See how you're holding up. I'm fine. Tired, but fine. Good. That's good. Another pause. I almost asked him about her. Almost said, is she okay? Why won't she talk to me? Did I do something wrong? But before I could, he spoke again. She's doing fine, by the way, he said, his voice smooth. Too smooth. I'm keeping an eye on her. Making sure she's got everything she needs. Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. Not the words themselves, they sounded helpful, reassuring, but the tone. Like he was trying too hard to convince me. Like he was reading from a script. But I was desperate. Desperate to believe that someone still cared about her. That someone was protecting her while I couldn't. Thanks, Dad, I said, and I meant it. Seriously. I don't know what I'd do without you. There was a long silence on the other end. So long I thought the connection had dropped. Dad? Yeah, he said finally. Don't mention it. And then he hung up. No goodbye. No stay safe. Just, gone. I stared at the phone in my hand, a strange unease settling in my chest. But I pushed it down. Told myself I was overthinking it. Told myself he was just being Dad, gruff, awkward, not great with emotional conversations. I should have known better. I should have heard the guilt in his voice. The way it was too smooth, too certain, like he was trying to cover something up. I should have heard the lie underneath the reassurance. But I didn't. Because I was too desperate to believe that someone, anyone, still gave a damn about the life I'd left behind. That night, I lay in my bunk and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the desert wind battering the tent walls. I thought about her. About the way she used to laugh, this loud, unfiltered sound that made everyone around her smile. About the way she used to look at me, like I was the only person in the world that mattered. And I wondered when I'd stop being that person for her. I wondered if I ever really was. The silence pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating, and for the first time since I'd enlisted, I let myself think the thought I'd been avoiding for months. What if she's already gone? I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring into the dark, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat, steady, relentless, refusing to stop even though everything else already had. They told me I was coming home 3 months early, and for a moment, I thought I'd heard them wrong. I was standing in the commander's office, still in my dusty fatigues, my mind somewhere else entirely, when he slid the papers across the desk. "Honorable discharge," he said. "Effective immediately. You've done your time, soldier. Go home. Go home." 2 words I'd been waiting to hear for 5 years. 2 words that should have felt like relief, like victory, like the start of something good. But all I felt was my heart hammering against my ribs and a strange, dizzying rush of adrenaline that made my hands shake. I was going home. To her? I didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't send a letter. I wanted to surprise her. I wanted to see the look on her face when she opened the door and saw me standing there, alive, whole, home. I imagined it 1,000 times on the flight back. Her running into my arms, crying, laughing, holding on to me like she'd never let go. I imagined us rebuilding. Starting fresh. Maybe even starting a family. I'd bought a ring on my last leave, a simple band with a small diamond, nothing extravagant, but it was all I could afford. I'd been carrying it in my pocket for months, waiting for the right moment. And now, finally, the moment was here. The flight felt endless. Hours and hours of sitting in a cramped seat, my leg bouncing, my mind racing. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. I just stared out the window at the clouds below and thought about her. About the way she used to rest her head on my chest and listen to my heartbeat. About the way she used to steal my hoodies and wear them around the house. About the way she used to say my name, soft, familiar, like it was her favorite word. When we finally landed, I didn't waste time. I grabbed my duffel bag and caught a cab straight from the airport. The driver tried to make small talk, asking where I'd been, thanking me for my service, but I barely heard him. I just stared out the window, watching the familiar streets roll by, my heart pounding harder with every mile. The house looked the same. White shutters. The little garden she used to tend, though it looked a bit overgrown now. The porch where we used to sit on summer evenings, drinking iced tea and talking about nothing. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. But something felt wrong. The air was too still. Too quiet. There were no lights on inside, even though it was late afternoon. No sign of life. Just stillness. I paid the driver and walked up the steps slowly, my boots heavy on the wood. My hand was shaking as I pulled out my key. It took me 2 tries to get it in the lock, and when I finally did, the door creaked open with a sound that felt too loud in the silence. I stepped inside. The house smelled different. Not bad, just different. Like someone else had been living here. There were shoes by the door I didn't recognize, men's shoes, too big to be mine. A jacket hanging on the hook that wasn't mine either. And then I heard it. Her laugh. Soft. Familiar. The sound I used to dream about when I was lying in a foxhole with bullets flying overhead. The sound that used to mean home. It was coming from upstairs. I stood there for a moment, frozen, my brain struggling to process what I was hearing. And then, slowly, like a man walking toward his own execution, I moved toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, drowning out everything else. The ring box in my pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I reached the top of the stairs. The bedroom door was cracked open, just enough for me to see inside. And that's when everything stopped. She was there. Sitting on the edge of the bed, our bed, wearing one of my old t-shirts. Her hair was loose, falling over her shoulders, and her hand was resting on her stomach. Her very round, very pregnant stomach. But she wasn't alone. There was a man standing by the window, his back to me, shirtless. Broad shoulders. Graying hair. Familiar. Too familiar. My father. I don't know how long I stood there. Seconds. Minutes. Hours. Time didn't exist anymore. There was just the image in front of me, burned into my retinas, seared into my brain, impossible to unsee. He turned first. And when his eyes met mine, I watched his face go pale. Watched his mouth open and close like he was trying to find words that didn't exist. She looked up. Saw me. Her eyes went wide, and she stood up quickly, clutching the blanket around herself like it could somehow undo what I was seeing. "Babe," she started. But I couldn't hear her. Couldn't hear anything over the roaring in my ears, the sound of my entire world collapsing in on itself. 6 months pregnant. Maybe more. The math didn't lie. I'd been gone for 5 years. And she was 6 months pregnant. With my father's baby. In our bed. I don't remember stepping into the room. Don't remember closing the door behind me. But suddenly I was there, standing in the doorway, and they were both staring at me like I was a ghost. Maybe I was. Maybe the man who left 5 years ago had died overseas, and this was just what was left. Son, my father's voice cracked. He took a step toward me, his hands raised like he was approaching a wounded animal. Don't. The word came out cold. Hollow. I didn't recognize my own voice. She stepped forward, the blanket slipping from her shoulders, her belly on full display now. Let me explain. Explain? I laughed. It was a bitter, ugly sound that didn't belong to me. Explain what exactly? That you've been fucking my father while I was getting shot at? That you're carrying his baby in the bed I bought? In the house I paid for? She flinched. Her eyes filled with tears. Good. I wanted her to cry. I wanted her to feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. You weren't here, she said quietly, and there it was. The defensiveness. The justification. Like this was somehow my fault. Like I had abandoned her instead of serving my country. Like I was the villain in this story. I wasn't here. I repeated, my voice rising now. I wasn't here because I was bleeding in the fucking sand for you. For us. I wasn't here because I thought I was building a life worth coming home to. And this is what you did with it? It just happened, my father said, his voice weak. Pathetic. I turned to him. Looked at the man who taught me how to ride a bike. How to throw a football. How to be a man. And all I saw was a stranger. A coward. It just happened, I repeated, my voice shaking now. 5 years. 5 years you looked me in the eye. Shook my hand. Told me you were taking care of her. And the whole time, you were fucking her. He didn't respond. Just stood there, shoulders slumped, looking at the floor like a child caught stealing. I wanted to scream. Wanted to put my fist through the wall. Wanted to burn the whole house down with them inside it. But I didn't. Because the rage wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the emptiness. The hollow, aching void where my life used to be. I turned and walked toward the door. My legs felt like lead, but I kept moving. One foot in front of the other. Wait, she called after me. I stopped. Looked back. She was crying now, her hand on her belly, her face red and blotchy. I'm sorry, she whispered. I stared at her for a long moment. And then I said the only thing I could think of. No, you're not. You're just sorry you got caught. I walked out. Didn't slam the door. Didn't yell. Didn't look back. Because there was nothing left to fight for. I don't remember walking down the stairs. Don't remember stepping out into the front yard, the late afternoon sun hitting my face like a slap. I don't remember dropping my duffel bag on the porch or sitting down on the steps, my head in my hands, trying to breathe through the tightness in my chest that felt like I was drowning on dry land. All I remember is the silence. Not the kind of silence that's peaceful. Not the kind you sink into after a long day. This was the silence of something ending. The silence of a door closing. The silence of realizing that everything you thought was real was just a story you told yourself to survive. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the overgrown garden, the white shutters, the porch light that was starting to flicker as the sun dipped lower. This house used to mean something. It used to be ours. Now it was just a place where strangers lived. Behind me, I heard the front door creak open. Footsteps. Slow. Hesitant. Son. My father's voice. Low. Broken. I didn't turn around. Didn't move. Just kept staring straight ahead, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. He stopped. Cleared his throat. Tried again. I know there's nothing I can say. You're right, I said, my voice flat. There isn't. He stepped closer. I could feel him hovering behind me, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he didn't know what to do with his hands. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he said quietly. I never meant. Meant what? I snapped, finally turning to look at him. He looked smaller than I remembered. Older. His shoulders hunched, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed like he'd been crying. Good. You never meant to fuck my wife? You never meant to get her pregnant? You never meant to destroy everything? Which part wasn't supposed to happen, Dad? He flinched. Looked away. I was just trying to help. She was lonely. You were gone. And I. And you what? Decided to step in? Decided to take my place? I stood up now, towering over him, my hands balled into fists at my sides. You didn't help her. You replaced me. And you did it in my own goddamn house. I'm sorry. Stop. I held up a hand. Just stop. I don't want your apology. I don't want your excuses. I don't want anything from you. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Looked at me with this expression, this desperate, pleading look, like he was waiting for me to forgive him. Like he thought we could hug it out and move on. But I wasn't that person anymore. The son who looked up to him? The kid who thought his dad was a hero? That version of me died the second I saw him standing in my bedroom, shirtless, next to my pregnant wife. I need you to leave, I said quietly. What? I need you to get out of my sight before I do something I regret. He stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Turned. Walked back into the house. And I sat back down on the steps, my head in my hands, and tried to remember how to breathe. A few minutes later, the door opened again. This time, it was her. She stepped out onto the porch, wrapped in a robe now, her hair pulled back into a messy bun. She looked smaller than I remembered. Fragile. But I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt nothing. She sat down next to me. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could smell her perfume, vanilla and something floral, the same scent she'd been wearing the day I left. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just sat there, two people who used to love each other, now sitting in the wreckage of what we'd built. I didn't want you to find out like this, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I laughed. It was a sharp, bitter sound. How did you want me to find out? A letter? A phone call? Or were you just hoping I'd never come home? She flinched. Looked down at her hands. I don't know. You don't know, I repeated. That's great. That's really fucking great. I'm sorry. Stop saying that, I said, my voice shaking now. Stop saying you're sorry like it means something. You're not sorry. You're just sorry I came home early. She looked at me, her eyes wet. That's not true, isn't it? I turned to face her fully now. Tell me, when did it start? When did you decide I wasn't worth waiting for? She didn't answer. Just looked away, tears streaming down her face. Was it a year in? 2? Or did you wait until my side of the bed got cold before you invited him into it? Don't. No, I stood up, my voice rising now. You don't get to tell me what to do. You don't get to ask me to stop. You did this. You and him. So don't sit there and cry like you're the victim. She stood up too, her hands shaking. You weren't here, she shouted, her voice cracking. You left me. You chose the military over me, and I was alone. And there it was. The truth. The real reason. I chose duty, I said quietly. I chose to serve my country. I chose to honor my family. And I thought, you understood that. I thought you'd wait. You promised you'd wait. I tried, she sobbed. I tried, okay? But it was so hard. And he was there. And you weren't. And she broke off, covering her face with her hands. I stared at her. This woman I'd loved. This woman I'd built my entire life around. And I realized I didn't know her at all. You know what the worst part is? I said, my voice calm now. Eerily calm. It's not that you cheated. It's not even that it was with him. It's that you're standing here, trying to make me feel bad for serving my country. Like I abandoned you. Like this is my fault. She looked up at me, her face red and blotchy. I'm not saying. Yes, you are. I stepped closer. You're standing here, pregnant with my father's baby, and you're trying to make me the bad guy. And that's the part I'll never forgive. She didn't respond. Just stood there, crying, her hand resting on her belly like she was trying to protect it. I turned and walked down the steps. Picked up my duffel bag. Started walking toward the road. Where are you going? She called after me. I stopped. Looked back one last time. Somewhere you're not. And I kept walking. Didn't look back. Didn't stop. Just kept putting one foot in front of the other until the house disappeared behind me. Because I was done. Done fighting. Done hoping. Done pretending that any of this could be fixed. I was done with her. Done with him. Done with all of it. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt free. I stayed in a motel on the edge of town. The kind of place you don't stay unless you have nowhere else to go. Stained carpets. Flickering neon sign outside. The smell of cigarette smoke soaked into the walls. It was depressing. It was perfect. I didn't talk to anyone. Didn't call anyone. Didn't eat much, Just whatever I could grab from the vending machine down the hall. Chips. Candy bars. Stale coffee from the lobby. I wasn't hungry anyway. Hadn't been since I walked out of that house. I spent most of my time sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the TV without really watching it. News. Game shows. Infomercials. It all blurred together. White noise to fill the silence. At night, I'd lie on my back and stare at the water-stained ceiling, replaying everything. Every letter. Every phone call. Every moment I should have seen it coming. The signs were all there. I just didn't want to believe them. Your dad helped me fix the sink. Your dad brought groceries. Your dad stayed for dinner. How could I have been so stupid? How could I have been so blind? I thought about calling someone, my mom, an old friend from high school, someone from my platoon. But what would I even say? Hey, my wife's pregnant with my dad's baby. How's your week going? It sounded insane even in my head. So I stayed silent. Stayed alone. Because the truth was, I didn't want to talk. I didn't want sympathy or advice or people telling me it would get better. I just wanted to sit in the wreckage for a while. To feel it. To let it consume me until there was nothing left. 2 weeks in, I pulled out the ring. I'd forgotten it was still in my pocket, tucked in the inside flap of my jacket, right where I'd put it before I left the base. I held it in my palm, the small diamond catching the dim light from the bedside lamp, and I felt something crack inside me. This was supposed to be the start of something beautiful. I was supposed to come home, drop to one knee, and ask her to spend the rest of her life with me. We were supposed to build something. A family. A future. Something worth all the pain and distance and sacrifice. But that future was gone now. Burned to ash. And all I had left was this stupid ring and a hotel room that smelled like mildew. I meant to throw it away. I walked over to the trash can, held the ring over it, ready to let it drop. But I couldn't. I just stood there, holding it, feeling the weight of everything I'd lost. And then, for the first time since I was a kid, I cried. Not quiet tears. Not dignified. I broke. Ugly, choking sobs that tore out of me like something feral. I sank to the floor, my back against the bed, the ring still clutched in my fist, and I cried for the life I thought I'd have. For the woman I thought I knew. For the father I thought I could trust. I cried until there was nothing left. Until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen and I felt emptied out. Hollowed. And when I finally stopped, when the tears dried up and the room was silent again, I realized something. I wasn't crying for her anymore. I was crying for me. For the man I used to be. The man who believed in love and loyalty and forever. That man was gone. And I didn't know if I'd ever get him back. The next morning, I went back to the house. Not to reconcile. Not to talk. Just to get my things. I pulled up in the cab just after sunrise, the air still cool, the sky tinged with pink and orange. The house looked different in the morning light. Less haunting. Just sad. I walked up the steps slowly, my hands shoved deep in my pockets. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. She was sitting on the couch, her legs tucked under her, a blanket draped over her shoulders. Her belly looked even bigger now, round and full, a constant reminder of everything that had been taken from me. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes red and swollen like she'd been crying too. "You came back," she said softly. "I'm just here to get my stuff," I said, not looking at her. "Then I'm gone." She nodded. Didn't say anything. Just watched as I moved through the house, gathering my things. My uniforms. My photos. My dog tags. The little wooden box my grandfather gave me before he died. Everything that was mine and mine alone. I left everything else. The furniture. The dishes. The pictures on the wall of us smiling, pretending we were happy. None of it belonged to me anymore. None of it ever really did. As I walked toward the door, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, she called my name. "Wait." I stopped. Didn't turn around. Just stood there, my hand on the doorknob. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "I swear. I never wanted this to happen." I let out a slow breath. Stared at the door in front of me. "Then you should have let me die overseas." She gasped. "Don't say that." "Why not?" I turned to face her now, my expression blank. "It would have been easier, wouldn't it? You could have played the grieving widow. Everyone would have felt sorry for you. And you could have been with him without all the guilt." "That's not," she stood up, her hands shaking. "I never wanted you to die. I loved you. Don't. I held up a hand. Don't say you loved me. You don't get to say that anymore. She stared at me, tears streaming down her face. And for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered. The letters that stopped. The calls that ended too soon. The way she said you too instead of I love you. The way she let him into our bed, into our life, and didn't think twice about it. And the pity disappeared. Do you hate me? She asked quietly. I thought about it. Really thought about it. And I realized the answer was worse than hate. No, I said finally. I just don't know you. She flinched like I'd hit her. I turned and walked out. Didn't look back. Didn't say goodbye. Just closed the door behind me and kept walking. And I never saw her again. I moved 2 states away. Packed my life into the back of a U-Haul and drove until the landscape changed, until the roads were unfamiliar and the faces were strangers. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in a city I'd never been to, with paint-chipped walls and a window that looked out onto a parking lot. It wasn't much. But it was mine. And that was enough. I found a job at a veteran center, helping guys like me transition back into civilian life. It wasn't glamorous. The pay was shit. But it felt right. Like maybe, in some small way, I could take the pieces of myself that were broken and use them to help someone else. I started therapy. Court mandated at first, part of my discharge paperwork said I needed to check in with someone, make sure I wasn't a danger to myself or others. I resented it at first. Sat in that little office with the beige walls and the overstuffed couch and refused to talk. Just crossed my arms and stared at the clock, counting down the minutes until I could leave. But my therapist, Dr. Patel, a small woman with kind eyes and an unshakable patience, didn't push. She just sat there, waiting. And eventually, I started talking. It wasn't pretty. Some sessions, I couldn't get through a sentence without my voice breaking. Some days, I couldn't get out of bed at all. The nightmares came back, visions of the desert, the IED, the blood, but now they were mixed with images of her. Of him. Of that bedroom. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, gasping for air, my heart pounding like I was back in a war zone. Because I was. Just a different kind of war. One I couldn't shoot my way out of. But slowly, things started to shift. Dr. Patel taught me about trauma, about grief, about how the brain holds on to pain like it's trying to protect you. She taught me that healing wasn't linear. That some days would be good, and some days I'd fall apart, and both were okay. She taught me that I wasn't broken. Just bent. And maybe, with time, I could straighten out. I stopped checking her social media. That was the first rule I gave myself. No more scrolling through her Instagram at 2 a.m., torturing myself with pictures of her smiling, of her belly growing, of her looking happy without me. No more wondering if the baby had been born. No more imagining what my father looked like holding his child, my sibling, and pretending to be a good man. I deleted her number. Blocked her on everything. Burned the letters I'd kept, the ones where she said forever yours, because those words didn't mean anything anymore. And it hurt. God, it hurt. But I realized something important. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her to admit she was wrong or to tell me she was sorry or to beg for my forgiveness. The closure I was looking for wasn't going to come from her. It had to come from me. So I started building it. One day at a time. I met people at the Veterans Center who'd been through worse. Guys who came home to find their wives gone, their bank accounts drained, their kids calling another man dad. Guys who lost limbs, lost friends, lost pieces of themselves they'd never get back. And somehow, they were still standing. Still fighting. Still living. One guy, Marcus, became something like a friend. He was older than me, mid-40s, graying beard, scarred hands from 2 tours in Iraq. He didn't talk much about what he'd been through, but you could see it in his eyes. The weight. The ghosts. We'd grab coffee sometimes after group sessions. Sit in silence mostly. But one day, he asked me the question I'd been avoiding. You ever think about going back, he said. To her, I mean. I shook my head. No. Good. He took a sip of his coffee. Some things can't be fixed. And that's okay. Doesn't mean you failed. Just means you're smart enough to know when to walk away. I thought about that a lot. You're smart enough to know when to walk away. For so long, I thought leaving made me weak. A quitter. But maybe it didn't. Maybe it made me strong. I started running again. Every morning, before the sun came up, I'd lace up my sneakers and hit the pavement. At first, I could barely make it a mile without stopping, gasping for air, my leg, still sore from the shrapnel, screaming at me to quit. But I kept going. Pushed through the pain. Because it felt good to hurt in a way I could control. I started writing again too. Nothing fancy. Just thoughts. Memories. Things I needed to get out of my head and onto paper so they'd stop haunting me. I wrote about the desert. About my platoon. About her. About him. About the man I used to be and the man I was trying to become. And one day, I laughed. Really laughed. Not the bitter, hollow kind. But genuine, real laughter that came from somewhere deep and forgotten. I was at the center, and one of the guys, Tommy, a kid barely out of his 20s, told the worst joke I'd ever heard. Something about a duck and a bartender. It was stupid. Ridiculous. But I laughed so hard I almost choked on my coffee. And when I stopped, when I caught my breath and wiped the tears from my eyes, I realized something. I hadn't thought about her all day. Not once. And that felt like winning. Weeks turned into months. The nightmares came less often. The weight in my chest started to lift. I started to recognize myself in the mirror again, not the man I used to be, but someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who'd been to hell and back and decided to keep going anyway. I wasn't whole yet. Maybe I never would be. But I was healing. And that was enough. One morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about her in a week. That felt like freedom. I'm 30 now. It's been 5 years since I walked out of that house. 5 years since I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom and watched my life implode. 5 years since I sat in a motel room and cried until I couldn't breathe. And I'm still here. I work at the Veterans Center full-time now. I run support groups. I help guys navigate the VA system. I sit with them when they can't sleep, when the nightmares come back, when they're standing on the edge and don't know if they can keep going. I tell them what no one told me. It's okay to grieve what you thought your life would be. It's okay to be angry. And it's okay to let go. Some of them listen. Some of them don't. But I keep showing up. Because that's what you do. You survive. And then you help others survive. I don't hate her anymore. That's the truth. I don't hate him either. Not because I forgave them, I didn't. But because I realized hate is just another way of holding on. And I don't want to hold on anymore. I think about her sometimes. Wonder if she's happy. Wonder if the kid looks like him or like her. Wonder if she ever thinks about me, about the life we could have had. But those thoughts don't hurt anymore. They're just thoughts. Echoes of a past that doesn't belong to me anymore. Last month, I got a letter. Forwarded from my old address. Her handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away without opening it. Almost. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside, there were 3 pages. Front and back. Filled with apologies and regrets and I'm sorry written in 100 different ways. She said she thinks about me. That she wishes things were different. That she knows she can never undo what she did, but she wanted me to know she was sorry. I read it once. Slowly. And then I walked outside, pulled out my lighter, and burned it. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. But out of peace. Because I didn't need her apology to be whole. I didn't need her to feel sorry or to tell me she made a mistake. I didn't need anything from her at all. I'd already built something new. Something that was mine. Something that couldn't be taken away. I'm building a good life now. I have friends. People who understand. People who've been through hell and came out the other side. I have work that matters. I have a routine that keeps me grounded. I run every morning. I write every night. I laugh, real, genuine laughter, more often than I thought I ever would again. Some nights, I still dream about the desert. About the IED. About the sound of her laugh coming from upstairs. But when I wake up, I don't panic anymore. I just breathe. Remind myself that I'm here. That I'm safe. That I survived. And when I look in the mirror, I don't see the broken man I used to be. I see someone stronger. Someone who went to war twice, once overseas, once at home, and came out the other side. I see a man who chose himself. Who walked away when staying would have destroyed him. Who rebuilt when rebuilding felt impossible. And that's the only victory I need. Last week, one of the guys at the center, a kid named Dylan who came back from Afghanistan with PTSD and a shattered marriage, asked me how I did it. How I moved on. I thought about it for a long time. And then I told him the truth. You don't move on, I said. You just keep moving. One day at a time. One step at a time. And eventually, you realize you've gone farther than you ever thought you could. He nodded. Didn't say anything. But I saw it in his eyes, the flicker of hope. The belief that maybe, just maybe, he could survive this too. And that's why I do this. That's why I show up every day. Because if I can help even one person find that hope, then maybe all the pain, all the loss, all the shit I went through wasn't for nothing. Maybe it was just preparation for something better. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever love someone again, if I'll ever trust someone enough to let them in. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. But I know this, I'm not the same man who left for war 5 years ago. I'm not the same man who walked into that bedroom and saw his life fall apart. I'm someone new. Someone forged in fire and loss and the kind of pain that either breaks you or makes you unbreakable. And I chose unbreakable. I'm 30 years old. I work with veterans. I run every morning. I write every night. I laugh. I live. And when I look back at everything, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the loss, I don't see a tragedy anymore. I see a second chance. And that's my legacy. 2 years later, I got a message. I was sitting in my apartment, eating takeout and half watching a baseball game, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting spam or a work email. But it wasn't. It was from him. My father. Can we talk? I stared at those 3 words for what felt like an eternity. My first instinct was to delete it. Block him. Pretend I never saw it. I'd spent 2 years building a life without him, without her, without any of the poison they'd left behind. And now, out of nowhere, he wanted to talk. Part of me wanted to ignore it. To let him sit in his guilt and his regret and his bullshit apology that I knew was coming. He didn't deserve my time. Didn't deserve my attention. Didn't deserve anything from me. But another part of me, the part that still remembered being his son, that still remembered looking up to him as a kid, wanted to know. Wanted to hear what he had to say. Wanted to see if he'd finally own up to what he'd done. So, against my better judgment, I responded. Fine. When and where? We met at a diner on the outskirts of town. Neutral ground. Somewhere public where I wouldn't be tempted to do something I'd regret. I arrived early, ordered coffee, and sat in a booth by the window, watching the parking lot. When his truck pulled in, I felt my stomach tighten. I hadn't seen him in 2 years. Hadn't heard his voice. Hadn't allowed myself to think about him except in the context of what he'd taken from me. He stepped out of the truck slowly, like his joints hurt. And when he walked through the door, I barely recognized him. He looked old. Worn down. His shoulders were hunched, his face lined with wrinkles I didn't remember, his hair more gray than brown now. He looked like a man who'd been carrying a weight too heavy for too long. Good. He spotted me, hesitated, then walked over and slid into the booth across from me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Just sat there, 2 strangers who used to be family. Thanks for meeting me, he said finally, his voice rough. I didn't respond. Just stared at him, my hands wrapped around my coffee mug, waiting. He cleared his throat. Looked down at his hands. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. And I don't blame you. But he stopped. Took a breath. I needed to see you. Needed to say some things. So say them, I said flatly. He flinched. Nodded. Stirred his coffee even though he hadn't added anything to it. She left me, he said quietly. Took the kid. Said I ruined her life. I didn't react. Didn't smile. Didn't feel sorry for him. Just waited for him to continue. She said I was a coward. That I destroyed my own family for nothing. And she was right. He looked up at me, his eyes red and wet. I lost you. I lost everything. I took a sip of my coffee. Let the silence stretch. Let him sit in it. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking now. I know it doesn't fix anything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry. That I think about what I did every single day. You're right, I said, cutting him off. It doesn't fix anything. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like he didn't know what to say. You didn't lose me, Dad, I continued, my voice calm. Cold. You didn't misplace me. You didn't make a mistake. You threw me away. You looked me in the eye, shook my hand, told me you'd take care of her, and then you fucked her. In my bed. In my house. While I was bleeding for a country that didn't even care if I came home. He flinched with every word, his face crumpling. I know. No, you don't know. I leaned forward now, my eyes locked on his. You don't know what it's like to carry a picture of someone for 5 years, to write letters that never get answered, to almost die and have the only thing keeping you alive be the thought of coming home. You don't know what it's like to walk into your own house and see your wife, pregnant with your father's baby, and realize that everything you fought for was a lie. He was crying now. Full on sobbing. And I felt nothing. You want forgiveness? I asked. You want me to tell you it's okay, that I understand, that we can move past this? He nodded, his hands shaking as he wiped his eyes. I can't give you that, I said. Because it's not okay. And I don't understand. And we're never moving past this. I stood up. Pulled a 20 out of my wallet and dropped it on the table. I hope you find peace, Dad. I really do. But you're not going to find it with me. I turned and walked toward the door. Please, he called after me, his voice cracking. I stopped. Looked back one last time. Goodbye. And I walked out. I didn't feel victorious. Didn't feel vindicated. I just felt done. I got in my car, drove home, and didn't think about him again. Because I was finally free.